Tonight, administrators move in and force a dozen George Columbaris restaurants to shut. Also tonight, drenching rain puts out the fires in New South Wales while causing catastrophic floods. Having a spray at street art, Melbourne's iconic laneway under attack. And Korean film Parasite makes Oscars history. Good evening, Tamara Oudyn with ABC News. Just months after being rocked by a staff underpayment scandal, the restaurant empire of George Columbaris has gone into voluntary administration. A dozen restaurants with hundreds of staff will stop trading immediately. Columbaris's company, Made Establishment, held a crisis meeting this afternoon. Our reporter James Hancock has been following the story and joins me now live. So James, what came out of that meeting?
Well, we know, Tam, that 12 restaurants will close immediately, including Electra Dining Room here in the city, which was previously the Press Club. It follows the damaging wages scandal, which saw Made Establishment Group back pay more than 500 employees $7.8 million in wages and superannuation. Now, these workers were employed at the Press Club, Ghazi, Hellenic Republic and Jimmy Grant's restaurants between 2011 and 2017. The company tried to distance itself from the scandal by rebranding some of its restaurants, the Press Club becoming Electra and Hellenic Republic at Brunswick East becoming the Crofter Bar and Dining Room. But receivers Caught-a-Mentha say that despite the best efforts of the company, it was unable to turn the business around amid declining trade. Now, we're told by the receivers that all staff have been paid wages and superannuation up to today's date. It'll try to find a buyer for the restaurants, with a creditors meeting to be held next Thursday.
James, one would think this would be devastating for George Columbaris. Have we heard from him?
Well, George Columbaris took to social media late this afternoon, putting a statement up. In it, he said that, "To all of my team, I truly regret it has come to this," adding that the last few months have been the most challenging I've ever faced. Of course, Columbaris lost his job on Channel 10's MasterChef following this wages scandal. Tam.
James Hancock, thank you. Japanese authorities have confirmed another 60 people on board the cruise ship docked off the country's coastline have tested positive for coronavirus. This brings the total number of cases on the ship to 130. At least 7 of them are Australians. North Asia correspondent Jake Sturmer joins me live now from Yokohama. Jake, what's the latest you're hearing from the Diamond Princess cruise ship?
Tamara, the captain has just told the passengers on board that it's actually another 66 cases of coronavirus. There are ambulances and self-defence force disaster release trucks just behind me, and they have been taking passengers already. 4 have left, taking those confirmed cases to hospitals across Japan. That brings the total confirmed number of cases to 136, and that's a figure that's been steadily increasing since the ship went into lockdown last week.
What does this development mean for the remaining passengers on board that ship?
Well, there are still around 3,600 passengers and crew on board, and this significant jump is starting to cause concern. They are in quarantine until the 19th officially, but the quarantine clock will reset for those who've been in contact with the confirmed cases. We've also heard from the Japanese health minister that he is considering testing all of the passengers, but that will be a huge logistical exercise and is yet to be decided. The challenge now will be keeping everyone on board calm and occupied for the rest of the quarantine period.
Jake Sturmer in Yokohama, thank you. Well, there's been another spike in coronavirus cases in China. After a significant fall yesterday, the number of infections has jumped now to more than 40,000. The death toll has also risen to over 900. There are 15 confirmed cases in Australia. 5 previously reported cases have now recovered from the virus. The jump in infections in China has dashed hopes the crisis may be subsiding, and now tens of millions of people are returning to work after the Lunar New Year holiday. China correspondent Bill Birtles reports from Beijing.
Back to work, but not back to normal. Beijing's extended Lunar New Year holiday is finally over, but many are too afraid to go back to work. Transport restrictions mean many out-of-towners haven't returned. Those who are back say it's a struggle.
It's taking a huge toll on my business. The only people around here are other shop owners, not customers. And it's hard to get fresh products delivered with all the road closures.
For now, our business is being affected, but crisis brings opportunity, right? So I'm not too worried about it.
The epicentre Hubei remains locked down. As the death toll rises, public anger is still simmering about the death of a doctor there last week, who was reprimanded in the early stages for telling others about the outbreak. Dr Li Wenliang's mother has now called for an investigation.
We won't give up until they give us an explanation.
While the number of cases has jumped on the cruise ship in Japan, some good news from Hong Kong, as hundreds of passengers on a ship quarantined for 6 days were allowed to disembark. Authorities gave the green light after all those on board tested negative for the coronavirus. But mainland China, and particularly Hubei province, is still very much the focus. With the death toll now well above the SARS crisis of 17 years ago, the World Health Organization is finally sending in a team there. 97% of all confirmed cases are in Hubei, where life's very much on hold, while the rest of the country tries to return to normal.
Normal workdays in cities of 22 million people do not look like this. Empty subways, shuttered shops and closed factories. While the outbreak is the priority, everyone here wonders how long China's government will allow the world's second largest economy to continue like this. Bill Birtles, ABC News, Beijing.
Back home now, and it's been both destructive and just what New South Wales needed. A storm event that tore through the state means all bushfires should be out by the end of the week. But it's all come at a huge cost. The insurance industry has declared the event a catastrophe, with claims in excess of $45 million.
Normally, the staff at this Milperra bait and tackle shop would be giving tips for the best spot for a fish. But overnight, the fishing came to them.
Get a rod and get some worms outside and you can go for it. Catch a few fish across the road. There's mud all through the back. It's lifted everything through the storeroom in there, just thrown it up. Freezers were upside down.
The area was ordered to evacuate as the Georges River peaked in the early hours of the morning. This petrol station was inundated.
It happened about 3 years ago, but it was a lot worse than this. But, you know, what do you do? It's life. It's Australia. Live with it.
Fire and Rescue New South Wales has received more than 15,000 000 calls since Saturday afternoon.
The number of calls that we received in the peak period was actually almost double that we were receiving at the worst of the bushfires.
Tens of thousands are still without power, and it'll take days to get everyone back online. In Windsor, the old bridge was completely inundated, a mass of debris the only sign it was still there. Meanwhile, water lapped at the bottom of the new bridge. With the Windsor, Richmond and Yarramundi bridges all underwater, people who would normally just drive a few minutes across the river are now either stuck here or have to detour a couple of hours into the Blue Mountains to get home.
The bridge is shut about 15 minutes before we came through, and luckily my parents are this side, so we were able to stay there.
Among the chaos, there was relief. The monster Gospers mountain fire was extinguished by the rain, and 17 fires still burning are expected to be out by the end of the week. And for farmers, the liquid gold was a reprieve from the unrelenting drought.
Over the weekend, we've measured 14 mils, and hopefully we'll snag a shower or two over the next couple of days to help that number rise a bit.
And they'll always welcome more. Kathleen Calderwood, ABC News.
Well, another silver lining from that huge dump of rain has been a much-needed boost for Sydney's dwindling water supplies. Paul Higgins joins us now to walk us through the figures. Paul.
Well, Tam, they've certainly gone from fire to flood up there. Sydney's been on stage 2 water restrictions, with its biggest dam, Warragamba, dropping to 40% full. But after those hundreds of millimetres of rain over the weekend, today it's 64% full and could reach 70%. That's a 30 percentage point boost in just a few days. millimetres. As for Victoria, we did have some reasonable rainfall over the fire grounds overnight and today. These green areas you can see indicate more than 15 millimetres of rain, so it's not the hundreds of millimetres that extinguished the New South Wales blazes, and fires will continue to burn for the coming weeks. More on our weather a little later, Tam.
Thank you, Paul. The Morrison government has suffered an embarrassing blow, losing a vote on the floor of Parliament after the defection of a Nationals backbencher. Tensions in the coalition were once again causing headaches for the Prime Minister today as he welcomed an important ally to Parliament. Here's political editor Andrew Probyn.
Indonesia's president came with what he called a gift.
Love to see it. You bring the rain. You are the rain man.
Not rain, but trade. A deal that will see almost all Australian exports enter Indonesia tariff-free. In return, this country will look to ease visitor restrictions.
Simplify and streamline the issues of entry into Australia.
Joko Widodo given the honour of addressing Parliament.
Good day, mate.
Just the second Indonesian president to do so.
A friend in need is a friend indeed.
One old friend with a new vantage point, there to see the trade negotiations he started sealed by the man who succeeded him. Malcolm Turnbull making his first visit to Parliament since his toppling, but still facing questions on climate and coal.
It's been a fault line in the coalition for a very long time.
That fault line now a chasm.
The key thing from my perspective is that the Commonwealth shouldn't be in the business of building or funding a new coal-fired power station.
That provoked open warfare. Nationals MP George Christensen slamming inner-city Liberals for backing renewables, while his Senate colleague...
Renewable energy are the dole-bludgers of the energy system.
Those people who are advocating that the government should fund coal-fired power are basically making a case for higher emissions and higher energy prices, and that is nuts.
The Nationals' anger transcends policy, with a Barnaby Joyce ally and Michael McCormack critic abandoning the party room to sit solo.
I still remain a loyal and faithful government member.
No amount of marketing or spin can hide the humiliation.
Labor leapt on the defection of Lou O'Brien to make immediate mischief, teaming up with a half-dozen rebel Nationals to install him as Deputy Speaker, a job that comes with a 20% pay rise. Losing control of Parliament might have more serious consequences next time. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
The state and federal governments are being offered an extra $2 billion to build a tunnel as part of Melbourne's airport rail link. The consortium offering the cash wants an underground train line from the CBD to Sunshine to link the city to Melbourne's west and help ease congestion in some of the state's fastest growing suburbs. Here's state political reporter Bridget Rollison.
As travellers waited for the shuttle bus at Melbourne Airport today, some were wishing for a faster option.
It can take an hour and a half to 2 hours. Pretty crap. A decent rail link, not just a Mickey Mouse rail link.
A decent rail link might depend on whether there'll be a tunnel that avoids congested tracks in Melbourne's west. A private consortium is offering the state and federal governments an extra $2 billion for a 6-kilometre tunnel from the city to Sunshine, providing new tracks and more trains to the underserviced western suburbs.
The tunnel would achieve also unlocking and separating the Victorian lines, the regional lines from the metropolitan lines.
The governments are yet to reveal the exact route. The cheaper option is still on the table, to use the existing congested above-ground tracks that lead into the new $11 billion metro tunnel. And that would also force travellers to change trains at Sunshine.
We want to get the right outcome for Victorians. We want a fast, efficient rail system that is built as quickly as possible.
There is one opportunity to get this right, and I don't want to see either Daniel Andrews or the Prime Minister sell Victoria short.
The Melbourne Airport is part of the consortium that wants a tunnel built for the airport rail link. It says the project is a once-in-a-generation that needs to be fast, frequent and affordable for passengers, and it's urged the government not to cut corners.
We're working through all of these options, and all of these options, importantly, have a connection through Sunshine.
While those representing the region say new tracks are desperately needed, and they're willing to wait until the time is right to go underground.
What we can't afford to do is to lose a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get Melbourne Airport Rail right.
Bridget Rollison, ABC News, Melbourne.
Still to come this hour, a 7:30 special, the housing boom that's pricing people out of the Australian dream.
Hi there, welcome.
Sydney and Melbourne are back on fire.
We can't keep having our house prices rise to these sorts of levels.
It is a crisis where we're likely to see fewer and fewer Australians, particularly poorer Australians, own their own home.
Plus, meet the farmers seeing rain for the first time in years. That's coming up.
In Thailand, hundreds of people have gathered to remember the 29 victims killed in the country's worst ever mass shooting. The gunman was shot dead by police in a shopping centre after a 17-hour siege at the weekend. The local community has now come together to help support families of the victims. Southeast Asia correspondent Amy Bainbridge reports.
Small gestures in a large gathering. Buddhist prayers meant to help guide the souls of the deceased to heaven. This is a city in mourning. The vigil was held just a short distance from the Terminal 21 shopping centre, where dozens of people were killed.
We came here for tonight because we were shocked for the tragedy last night.
The shooting spree began when Thai soldier Jakrapant Thoma opened fire at a house, an army camp and a Buddhist temple before taking his rampage to this shopping mall in the centre of Nakhon Ratchasima.
My mother was driving the car past him. Both of us stopped at the same spot. He just opened the door and fired into our window.
The siege at the shopping centre lasted 17 hours, finally ending when the 32-year-old army major was shot by security forces. Some of the people who managed to escape the mall took refuge at this nearby internet cafe.
30 to 40 people came here. There were some people coming in and some were going out. It was like that the whole night long until the morning. I was frightened.
A 13-year-old boy was among those killed, his father struggling to express how he felt.
I don't want to lose him like this. This is too sudden. We had plans for him growing up.
The Terminal 21 shopping mall remains closed as people come here to remember the victims. Preparations are being made for it to reopen on Thursday as the city comes to terms with Thailand's worst mass shooting. This horrific attack has left an indelible mark on this small city. Amy Bainbridge, ABC News, Nakhon Ratchasima.
There are calls tonight for the corporate watchdog to investigate a disgraced former US congressman for insider trading in an Australian drug company. Investors have told tonight's Four Corners the Australian regulator dismissed warning signs about Republican Chris Collins long before he was convicted of insider trading in the US. And as Stephanie March reports, they're calling for ASIC to act.
From congressman to criminal. The scandal that brought down US Republican Chris Collins began at Donald Trump's White House.
What I was most staggered by was the, the sociopathic level of brazenness in procuring insider trading from the White House and thinking that you would get away with it.
Collins was a director of the Sydney biotech Innate Immunotherapeutics when he shared confidential corporate information about the company's failed drug trial with his son during a picnic on the White House lawn. He's been sentenced to 26 months in prison by US authorities, but some Innate investors say that's not enough.
Effectively, Chris Collins has admitted in the United States to a number of breaches, willful, intentional breaches of Australian law.
Sydney barrister and Innate investor James Oudyn says Collins' conviction in the US doesn't mean ASIC shouldn't take action.
You want to send the message throughout Australia and around the world that Australia is not a paradise for white-collar criminals.
Those calls echoed in Washington too, with speculation that Collins may be pardoned by Donald Trump.
If that's the case, if there's going to be any justice that's going to be levelled in this case, it's going to have to come from Australian authorities.
Despite Collins' court admissions, an ASIC spokesperson said the regulator did not identify sufficient evidence to warrant formal investigation. Stephanie March, ABC News.
The South Korean film Parasite has been the surprise winner at this year's Oscars, becoming the first foreign language film to take out the Best Picture award. The dark satire won a number of key categories, including Best Director and Best Original Screenplay. But that's where the surprises ended, with Australia's only nominee Margot Robbie going home empty-handed. Here's National Arts reporter Michaela Boland.
Right from the opening number, the tone was set for the 92nd Academy Awards. Through the on-stage entertainment and the choice of presenters, people of colour and women from all over the world made their voices heard. A preemptive strike in a year when Hollywood's establishment was again facing a backlash for a lack of diversity in many categories.
So many great directors nominated this year.
I don't know, Chris. I thought there was something missing from the list this year.
Vaginas? Yeah.
A clear winner emerged early. The Korean language genre-busting film Parasite, making history more than once.
Bong Joon-ho.
Bong Joon-ho.
Parasite. It won Best International Film, Best Director and Best Picture, the first foreign language film to do so.
Santin, I love you.
Taika Waititi took out Best Adapted Screenplay, becoming the first Maori to win an Oscar.
I dedicate this to all the Indigenous kids in the world who want to do art.
The acting gongs played out as expected. In the supporting categories, Australia's only hope, Margot Robbie, missed out to Laura Dern for Marriage Story. And an emotional Brad Pitt accepted his first acting Oscar.
Once upon a time in Hollywood, ain't that the truth?
Joaquin Phoenix won Best Actor for Joker. And Renee Zellweger was recognised for her role as the tragic Judy Garland. There was no dedicated host again, giving a bigger platform to a variety of presenters.
I feel like a very opportune moment in history is happening right now.
A sentiment echoed throughout the ceremony. Michaela Boland, ABC News.
Melbourne's iconic Hosier Lane got a new lick of paint on the weekend that's polarised opinion about what constitutes street art. Some are describing the spray paint attack as an assault on the heart of Melbourne, while others believe it's the best thing that's happened to the laneway in years.
It was broad daylight when around a dozen men pulled off this guerrilla street art stunt as tourists looked on.
A disgraceful act of vandalism in Hosier Lane.
I think it's great, you know, it's graffiti taking back the walls.
From pop stars to politicians, Melbourne's Hosier Lane is world known for its colourful statements, and it's been painted over many times before. Now the city mayor is having a spray of her own.
Idiots is one word for it. They are vandals, they are criminals. They have really assaulted a part of the city that's very special.
Council workers began cleaning up as local retailers looked on.
Down here, any street art is culture, I guess, but when you're coming through and destroying people's art, I don't think it's part of a culture.
What we saw on the weekend is an act of damage, it's an act of vandalism, and it's something that police are taking very seriously.
But street artists are seeing it in a different light.
The big names are all saying it's the best thing they've seen in Hosier for years.
Dean Sunshine works with some of Australia's top street artists, many who won't paint down Hosier Lane anymore because it's become too commercial.
I think they've just sort of come in and they've just done this, it's uncommissioned, and, you know, I think it's great.
Police don't know who is behind the paint bombing, and now the laneway has been cleaned up. The local council is asking artists to come back and paint again, as long as they get approval. Amelia Terzon, ABC News, Melbourne.
The coronavirus crisis in China continues to weigh on the Australian dollar. Here's Alan Kohler.
Well, at the start of this year, the Aussie was 6 months into a fairly solid, if jerky, rally.
But in January, the usual 1% reversal turned into much more than that as the coronavirus outbreak revealed itself. The exchange rate has corrected nearly 5% now since the start of the year, and has slipped back below 67 US cents today for the first time since July. The share market appears less concerned though, down a bit today, but prices bounced in February as buyers returned looking for bargains. The big moves today were Boral down 11% when CEO Mike Cain quit after revealing that staff in its North American subsidiary had been inflating earnings for 20 months by $36.6 million. JB Hi-Fi, on the other hand, jumped 11% after reporting a 6.5% increase in profit and a solid lift in the dividend. Apart from that, it was mostly negative, with insurance companies getting flooded and miners getting a bit sick. Here are a couple of charts showing the impact of the coronavirus on China. First, the normal big increase in travel around China for the Lunar New Year didn't happen, which is no surprise, but quite stunning when you see it like that. And second, real estate activity usually picks up after Lunar New Year, but this time it stopped and stayed stopped. Expect that kind of thing to be repeated through the Chinese economy. Global markets fell back today and Friday. Iron ore, oil and base metals fell on commodity markets while gold edged higher, and Bitcoin has gone above $10,000 again. Note that although the price is only half that 2017 peak, the volumes or amount of the money you can't touch being bought and sold is about double what it was then. And that's finance.
The Australian women's basketball team has qualified for the Olympics after beating Brazil in France. The game was in the balance when Brazil took the lead late in the third quarter. The Opals responded to the challenge and dominated the final quarter. Liz Cambage finished with 29 points, 7 rebounds and 5 blocks.
5 to shoot. Oh, Liz Cambage sends it into row 1A and says, come at me.
I love her passion, and you've got to just embrace her for what she is, don't you?
The tears flowed as Australia won by 86 points to 72 to finish second in its group and book a ticket to Tokyo. Brazil will miss the Olympics for the first time since 1988. Time for the weather now. Here's Paul Higgins.
And Tamara, looks like our sticky summer is going to roll on with showers today in our east and north and thunderstorms there tomorrow. And we also had some rain overnight in our east at Mount Useful, 45 millimetres, and Club Terrace, which is on the Princess Highway in the fire zone, 44 millimetres. More rain swept in today, as you can see here. Baluk, the biggest fall, 28 millimetres there. And in the last hour, we've had these thunderstorms brewing in our far north and northwest. All up, Mallacoota has had 35 millimetres yesterday and today. Hopetoun, Rutherglen and Yarrawonga were warmest with 31 degrees. Around Melbourne, we had a few spots of rain, but mostly less than a millimetre. Today's city high 27.7 at 3:06 this afternoon. And outside right now, it's still a sticky 26. Sydney City ended up with 392 millimetres of rain over the past 4 days. That was their wettest week in 30 years and, in fact, more rain than we had in Melbourne all of last year. But it eased right off today as the trough producing it moved away and weakened. Ex-cyclone Damien is still bringing some rain to the west. We're in for some unsettled weather in central and eastern Victoria tomorrow as this trough sits over the state. It'll clear away Wednesday and Thursday, but then on Friday another trough is going to bring widespread showers and storms. But tomorrow, lots more rain for the east coast. In Brisbane, some afternoon rain up to 35 millimetres. Sydney and Canberra in for afternoon showers and storms. In Hobart, morning rain, but dry in Adelaide and Perth. Back home, scattered showers tomorrow over our east and afternoon thunderstorms over eastern and eastern central areas, especially you can see over the ranges. A shower or two in other areas, but staying dry in our northwest where it'll be very warm and sunny. A humid day across the state with morning fog patches in the south and light to moderate southerly winds. On the bays, a westerly at 10 to 15 knots in the morning, a south to southwesterly 15 to 25 knots in the afternoon, and strong winds tomorrow on the East Gippsland coast. Well, a few spots of rain around Melbourne tonight, not amounting to much. Cloudy and muggy tomorrow. There is a chance of morning fog and a shower or two in the afternoon. A mild and humid 19 overnight, 26 tomorrow with a moderate southwesterly wind in the afternoon. On Wednesday, a morning shower of 2, 25. Thursday, partly cloudy, 29. Friday, afternoon showers and storms, 6 to 15 millimetres of rain and 30. Saturday, a few showers, 23. Sunday, cloudy with a possible shower, 25. And 27 next Monday. Tam.
Thanks very much, Paul. Now here's Lee Sales with 7:30.